Hi all, Jeff Hale here with another instructional video. Today we're going to be tying a nymph for winter steelheading or summer steelheading, but mostly winter steelheading on the Olympic Peninsula. We'll be fishing under strike indicator, either using split shot or a weighted fly to get this nymph down, and I'll show you how we do that. Basically this is a fancy type of a yarny that we're going to be tying. Originally, as you can see here, I would tie up leaders to make my yarnies, and I would take an egg and I would run a piece of mono through it, and then I would tie a double egg loop, and not only would I cinch up that egg on the mono, but I just cinch up my yarn, cut it to length, and boom, I was done. And I kind of like to put a couple of split shot up above it to get at that neutral buoyancy. But, you could do that under a gear rod or under a float rod. And so, fly tying's an art. So I like to spiff it up a little bit and actually tie it on a hook. It makes me feel better about nymphing. And so this particular fly that we're going to tie today is called the double shot. And that's because you got the combo plate. You got the bead and you got the yarn, and you can tie it either in lightly weighted like I have here with bead chain eyes. You could tie it heavily weighted with dumbbell eyes, or you could tie it unweighted, which I prefer sometimes. You got your bead off the back, your flash, you got your egg yarn, and you got your egg veil. Fishes pretty well. One thing I want you to notice though about this hook that I'm using is it is a straight eye hook, right? So if I'm ever just tying my tippet or my leader directly to a fly, I don't want it to be upturned or downturned. If it's turned up or turned down, you should really use a double twirl knot. But I just like to use the fisherman's knot, or I like to use the no slip mono loop. And so when you do that, you want a straight eye so that when you set the hook, that line is pulling directly in line with the shank, and you will put that hook right in the fish's mouth. If we go back and we look at this fly, this is on an up-eyed Gamakatsu, I think it's a 1, maybe it's a 1/0. And the reason I've snelled the hook is because when I set the hook, I want a straight line connection to that shank, and I want to be pulling that hook point not away from the steelhead's mouth, but right into its mouth, right? So if you're going to use an up eye or down eye hook, you might want to snell it or use a double twirl knot. I just prefer to use these straight eye hooks. And this hook that we're using today is an Anrex. They call them the NS-172 Curved Gammarus number 4. So Gammarus is a fancy name for the scuds. So this would be a huge scud hook. I don't think I'd ever fished a freshwater scud this big, but that doesn't mean they don't exist. So we're going to go ahead and get started and tie this. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to pick out one of your favorite beads. And you can use trout beads. They make some great colors. You can use heavy beads. You can just use plastic beads. This is one of my favorites. It's one of the trout beads in peach color. And so the first thing I'm going to do after I put my hook in the vise is I'm going to get some 4-pound Maxima monofilament. And I just need a small piece of it, maybe 3-4 inches is all. And I'm going to take this bead, and for right now I'm going to thread this bead onto this mono. Boy, my eyes are bad. I'm going to turn the lights on here so that I can see. You see how ugly I really am. And once I have this bead threaded on this mono, I'm just going to set this aside. So you can see I have it threaded on here. I'm just going to set that over here for right now. Then I'm going to get some crystal flash. You can use clear color crystal flash, red, pink, whatever you want. Do whatever you want. I'm using a orange color today. I'm going to take my bobbin and my thread, Put this in the center of the camera here. And I'm just going to tie in, and I'm going to tie in towards the back. Okay, I get a little tag there going. Go ahead and throw a 1/2 inch in there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut some of the crystal flash, and you can see I kind of want the crystal flash on this finish fly coming kind of straight off. So I'm going to take about 8, 9 strands, cut them short. I'm going to tie them in, and I'm going to flip them over and double the number of strands for the tail. So I'm going to tie them in. Kind of check that out, make sure it's coming off straight. Okay, double it over, catch it. Looks good. I'm going to go ahead and trim it. And of course, I'm a heavy glue user. Put a little drop of that super glue on there. Zap a gap, whatever you got. Head cement. Throw a couple more wraps on there. All right, now what we're going to do is we're going to go back and we're going to get our trout bead on light mono. And what we're going to do is we're going to tie it directly on top of the hook shank. And it's okay if you want a little bit of slack in there so that thing can bounce around, a little bit of movement when you're nymphing it through a run. So you don't have to do it real tight. Put it on top of here, and I'm going to throw a couple of loops over it with my bobbin, and I'm going to cinch it up just a little bit. All right, let's see. I got a little bit of movement in that. That's good enough. Okay, now we got these 2 long pieces, right? We don't want them super long, so what we're going to do is we're just going to cut them maybe 1 centimeter long. Take a couple more wraps. I'm going to take each of these mono tag ends and pull them back and lash them down so that this egg does not slip out. Kind of like we do when we tie in a senyo or extended piece of wire off of an intruder or something. Same kind of thing. We don't want it to slip out. So I got those latched down. I'm going to go ahead and snip off this mono. Any extra? Okay. I'm going to go ahead and give it another little shot of glue. Okay, now I'm going to come to about the middle of the hook, and I'm going to pick a couple of colors of yarn. I'm going to use one of my favorites, kind of a shrimp peach color. Let me turn the lights off, see if you can see that color better. It's kind of a shrimpy peach color. Okay, it's just standard egg yarn. And then the other one that I'm going to use is a pink. Let me hold them up together so you can look at the difference in the shades. See how this one is peachy, kind of shrimpy, and this one's pink? Those are the 2 I'm using. Lights back on. Okay. And I'm going to cut these about, I don't know, maybe 1 inch long, maybe 1.5 inches. All right. So this is very similar to whatever you do when you make an egg pattern, except I'm not going to be too worried about getting it exactly spherical or round. In fact, I don't really care because I got my bead right here. Excuse me. So here we go. I'm going to put this right about in the middle and keep it on top of the hook shank, right? Because that's one of the things we want here. We want this bead and the yarn and everything to not take up this gape. We want to leave this hook gape completely open so we have maximum space in there to hook a fish, right? We don't want any kind of thing that's going to impede that. So I wrap it around maybe 2-3 times, right? I'm going to catch it in front. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to lift and cut. You guys have all done this before when you make an egg pattern. I'm not worried about making this too spherical, and I'm going to go ahead and cut it a little long so that if I want to shorten it up, I can. So here you go. You got this puff ball. Lights off. Can you guys see that? So we have our crystal flash, our egg, and we have our puff ball. 2 colors of yarn. Okay. So again, I'm just going to take a little bit of super glue, just a tiny bit, and put it on those thread wraps. You wind up losing a lot of these, but as long as I'm tying a fly, I want to make it durable and last as long as I can. You might get several uses out of it if you're not, you know, ticking bottom. If you're just within a foot of the bottom, using a strike indicator and some split shot, you know, chances are you could keep this for quite a while. Usually when I'm fishing throughout the day, an 8-hour float, I'll lose 2 or 3 of them. So I kind of like to be close to the bottom. So anyway, what I'm going to do next is I'm going to take my multi-tool and grab my bead chain, because I don't want this heavily weighted. I kind of want it neutral buoyancy or just a little bit weighted. I just want to kind of negate the floating effects of that yarn so that when I snap it down, it gets wet and it sinks and holds that water. All right, again, we don't want to mess with the gape of the hook, so we're going to put this right on top. All right. And I like to tie it back a little ways from the eye of the hook and give myself some space. Turn this light off. I don't know if you guys can see that okay. This is not great video quality here, but I'm going to, wow, that makes it really hard for me to tie. I can't see anything hardly. If I was 20 again, this would be no problem. Okay, hope you can see that. Let's see if you can. All right, there we go. We got the eyes on that sucker. Okay. All right. Again, glue. Here we go. On the bottom side, I don't want this thing flipping around or spinning around when I'm trying to cast it. A little shot of glue there on the thread wraps, okay? And again, look, we have almost nothing down here. In fact, we have nothing down here. This is all open, which is what I want. All right, when that steelhead grabs it, I want to get him. Okay, now we're gonna do our final step. And, you know, you could just be done and fish this just like it is, but because, you know, I like to tie flies and it's an art, and you know, it just makes me feel better if I finish a fly. So I'm going to finish it with a dubbing loop, and I'm going to actually take some of this UV glow yarn. I don't know if you can see it. It's pretty sparkly. You see the sparklies in there? I don't know. Can you see it? Maybe not. It sparkles a little bit. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut a piece of this, and I'm going to cut it about that long. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to separate it, and I'm going to lay it into really thin pieces, kind of like hackle. I'm going to put it in the dubbing loop. I'm going to spin it, and then I'm going to stroke the fibers back, and I'm going to put an egg veil on this pattern. And I think it looks nice and covers up the eyes. You can also use black eyes if you're worried about the color of these silver. Or actually, they're probably not really silver. They're just chrome. They probably won't show up as anything more than black once you get down a couple of feet. All right, so I'm going to create an egg loop. You guys know how to do this. And I'm going to create the egg loop behind the eyes. Not the egg loop, I take that back. The dubbing loop behind the eyes. I'm going to walk my thread forward, let it hang off the front. I'm going to take my dubbing spinner, put that on there, take some wax, wax this guy up. I like quite a bit of wax. Okay, and then I'm going to take these fibers and I'm going to start walking them in here. All right. So if you can get a look at that, got those fibers in the loop. Now what I'm going to do is pinch, take my dubbing spinner, twist that thing a few times, boom, fibers aren't trapped in there. Okay, and then I like to take hackle pliers. I like to pinch it off. Take my scissors. Oops, let me do that again. All right, here we go. Now I'm going to pull this back like an egg veil, just like I'm palmering a hackle. And I'm going to do a couple turns behind the eyes. Okay, now I'm going to take a couple in front. If you want, you can figure eight the eyes, but I don't worry about that. And that's enough. I'm going to cross my thread over. Take my fingers, pull it all back, catch it, take a few wraps, and remove my dubbing loop. So now you got this pile of stuff. So before I do anything, I want to finish it off. And I like to do 2 whip finishes. I don't use a whip finish tool. I do it with my fingers. When I first started tying flies, I couldn't afford a whip finish tool. So I learned how to do it with my fingers, and now it's just kind of habit. So there we go. I got that done. Now before I glue this thing, I want to take toothbrush or your whatever you got and get that front egg veil puffed out. There you go. And again, you want maximum hook gape. You don't want anything in there. And that's about it. I'm going to hit it with a shot of head cement. Let's go ahead and turn the light off here so you can see what that looks like. So we have our egg in the back. We have our yarny, or our puff ball right there. We got our egg veil in the front. And we have our bead chain ice. Give it a little bit of weight, just enough to negate the buoyancy of the yarn. And that's it. That's the double shot. That is a killer when you're nymphing on any of the Olympic Peninsula rivers. Give it a try.